been friends with John for such a long time, even before Hassett was. And I just wanted to tell Hassett that John was already famous when you said he wasn't. That's, I mean, when, you know, we felt really, really lucky to have hired him at Stanford because he was, you know, a famous young up-and-coming scholar. I'm going to do something today that I don't approve of. I'm sorry. I'm going to kind of argue by extensive quotes from other people that you're not going to have time to read. Okay, so economics in the big wide world. John in 1993 asked the question, could there be a science of economics? And he answered, very probably yes. His skepticism was directed to theoretical, especially mathematical constructs, and he doesn't deny that there may well be much useful, if generally loose, causal knowledge to be had in economics. So I agree, and 3 decades later, I find myself sort of developing and defending John's view. I gave some Schumpeter lectures in Graz, and it turns out what I was doing was just following up on what John had said 3 decades earlier. Economics can be an exact science, but only in small worlds. So I'm going to run through the idea of small worlds very quickly. Most real world settings are not small worlds. And as John says, the complexity of the phenomena investigated by economics is such as to make claims of fundamental lack of order at least superficially plausible. What then should we do? Well, my answer is we should a development of John's original idea of loose knowledge. So I'm going to run through the idea of small worlds and along the way talk a bit about tendency principles and end up with defending loose knowledge that we take away from economics. So economics is exact. Look, here are some people telling us how exact it is, and why it's supposed to be exact, and how great it is that it's exact. Once of all, a stated mathematical form, it's obvious to all who can read it, the clarity is of great value, the conviction that underneath the messiness of appearances exists underlying order can be captured by logic and mathematics. What makes economics great, and quite frankly, what makes us the highest paid for social sciences is that we can, with very few basic assumptions, explain a wide variety. Very few basic assumptions we can actually explain. Well, no, they don't. So problems. The drive for exactness, I believe, and I think John did too, pushes economics to study small worlds, to treat real settings as small worlds. And anyway, economics is not an exact science. So let's think about small worlds. My claim is that economics can be an exact science in small worlds, and only in small worlds. Okay, consider how physics predicts precise results. It establishes sets of principles meant to be universal. When it uses these principles for precise prediction or control, the results are derived within models where, unsurprisingly, all the relevant factors for the phenomenon of interest are ones physics knows how to treat precisely. And that's not surprising. If you're going to get precise answers out, you better know how to treat all the elements that matter precisely. Otherwise, it cannot yield precise results. That is, if you put waffle in, you're going to get waffle out. So physics precise successes are in small worlds. Now, small world is relative to, I'm going to just run through this quickly. It's a given phenomenon, a given body of knowledge. A real setting is a small world for a phenomenon, X for a given discipline. All the factors in that setting that affect that phenomenon are ones that the discipline knows how to treat. The discipline knows how to calculate what happens when these factors occur together. So think about Hoffelmo, who was the founder of econometrics. He says, no, this was nice. Mary Morgan introduced me to Hoffelmo, and we had the conversation. He said about this very issue, no one asks physicists to predict the course of an avalanche, but economists ask to predict the course of the avalanche of the economy. So economists are expected to deal in large worlds, but they have the same kind of models that physicists have, small world models. Okay, so because physicists are asked to predict the avalanche of the economy. They tend to treat real settings as small worlds. So here we have Robert Skidelsky. Physics has in nature its own ready-made laboratory where events regularly repeat themselves. The social world lacks such stationary features. The standard economic model is typically a theoretical representation of a closed system. Economics reverts open systems into closed systems by excluding moves that would render the system unstable. Dictators freeze the frame by order. Economists do it by modeling. Skidelsky continued, notes that Nobel laureate Thomas Sargent defines a person as a constrained intertemporal stochastic optimized problem. Expectations about the future are simply probability distributions over a sequence of events. Uncertainty is reduced to probability and can thus be labeled as a special case. The neoclassical model of rationality, which Kahneman and Tversky set up as their benchmark to challenge, might make sense in a small, closed world with well-defined limits. The point toss experiment is supposed to replicate this, but it is irrelevant as a test of rationality in open systems. Okay. Then we've got Kay and King recently, well, not so recently, asked what insights do we gain from this model? The authors answer, the numbers, this is what they say, economists say, the numbers derived from this model should be the policy. That answer begins to make sense only if the economists believe that his model described the world as it really is. Okay, but a small world does not do that. Small world model does not do that. I was delighted when I saw this in Kay and King because I had the idea without labeling it small world, a similar idea, quite a long time before. So I'm very happy to have now had this opportunity with John to develop the idea this way. So what's wrong with converting open systems into closed systems or freezing the frame by modeling? Well, generally, it just doesn't work. Significant relevant features studied in other fields can't be fitted into an economics frame, or can't be properly fitted into an economics frame. Of course, you can cheat. You can put an exogenous shock, just the right size, into an equation. Physics does this with forces all the time. And in both fields, it's ad hoc. I mean, that's sort of how you get the reduction going in physics. You cheat, right? You can assign utilities arbitrarily in a way that gets the right answer, ad hoc. You can gerrymander choice sets, preferences, etc., ad hoc. Choose weightings, measures, and models that produce the right outcomes, ad hoc, etc. This all amount to giving up on exact science while preserving the pretense of it. So you come to a problem, the stuff you can put in legitimately doesn't give you the right answer. You want to still use the model, so you stick some stuff in arbitrarily, and lo and behold, you get an answer. Usually it turns out not to be the right answer anyway. Okay, so economics must work in the big, wide world. It's not much use to us if it's constrained to small worlds, because you can't. You might build a laser, and it's encased, and it's going to stay the way you want it to be, but the economy just isn't like that. So it's not, we're not dealing with small worlds. And it must work in the big wide world together with others. So it must muck in with a motley assembly of other knowledge sources. Again, here we have, okay, economics needs other fields, notably psychology, sociology, politics, ethics, history. Didn't put philosophy in there, which I thought was a bad mistake. Just applied the absence method of understanding. We should not be afraid to say to the economist, there are more things in heaven and earth ratio than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So there are two opposing strategies to getting economics to work with other sources of knowledge. Bring lessons from other knowledge sources into economics, and bring lessons from economics out, or take lessons from economics out. Think about the first one first. Examples. Well, you can pretend other sources of influence on decisions are genuine utilities. And that's why you've got in your vocabulary, so you just take other sources of influence. You might, for instance, remember Amartya Sen's resistance to rational choice theory, where he said, look, you just can't do that. There's really such a thing as commitment in addition. Okay, sociologists do the same. For instance, Michel Foucault sees everything as a matter of power relations. You could treat all causes as quantities willy-nilly and add them into economic models. You can model everything as a game, etc., etc. Bad idea, resulting in a false sense of security. Well, you've got all this mathematical modeling going on, and you've put in a lot of stuff you claim is precise and well justified. It gives you failed predictions and explanations. So the alternative is to bring lessons from economics out. Well, the good news about this is economics can contribute this way. The bad news is she must compromise her most prized virtues: rigor, exactness, and subject and value-free objectivity. She gives all that up, she can contribute, right, with other disciplines. So the good news is what she can offer is a great help with prediction, albeit qualitative. Rigor and exactness. So what I want to just suggest is that the rigor and exactness inside economic models makes her qualitative, inexact contributions outside exceptionally useful. This is my late husband, Stuart Hampshire, who's from whom I learned that sacrificing rigor is okay because you shouldn't bring more precision to a topic than it can bear. So my central thesis: in order to help with a large world outside its borders, economics should forego its pride in being entirely quantitative and exact. It should export her rigorously established principles as qualitative, inexact tendency principles. And this term I picked up from John Stuart Mill. You might think of it some other way. These are especially useful because their rigorous backing in economics models can show what kinds of settings they might obtain in. Okay, so first, economics should export rigorously established principles as qualitative, inexact tendency principles. So this is a proposal from John Stuart Mill: re-express precise, rigorously established as quantitative generics and export them as tendency principles. These tendency principles say not what happens when a factor is in play, but what it tends to contribute. As I said, all of Mill. Important features of tendency principles is that they tend to be qualitative, with really generally no quantitative measure of strength, sometimes a rough indicator like strong, widespread tendency, weak. Tendencies that are obtained in a setting often pull in opposite directions, like bed nets. If you give them away free, people might not value them because they're free and not use them. On the other hand, if you sell them, people might not want to buy them because they have to spend their money on other things. So they have these two tendencies pulling in opposite directions. There's often no stable rule of combination. You know, when we have opposing tendencies in mechanics, we've got the rule of vector addition for the forces. I think that, and there are some in economics, there are a variety of ways. Sometimes we have linear equations, sometimes we have simultaneous equation models. For the small world models, we usually have rules of combination to how to put together various different tendencies pulling in different directions. It's not clear to me that there are such rules really in nature for everything. So tendencies might have no stable rules of combination. They're usually the ones I'm interested in expressed as generics. So usually no quantifiers. Sometimes informally, we have a lot of hands-on knowledge about where it might be a reasonable place to apply them and expect them to obtain, or how to trigger them. But there are usually no quantifiers. The range of possible applications is not universal, and as I said, it's implicit at best. So again, Skidelsky, the human apple may have a tendency to fall to the ground, but this tendency is far too weak to be called a law. There's nothing in the market akin to the law of gravity. So here are some commonly used economic mechanisms, which are also called, which are also called tendency principles. Opportunity cost, marginal versus average cost, the whole standard setup of consumer theory: diminishing marginal utility, difference curves, substitution income effects, externalities, monopoly, the word I can't pronounce, monopsony, pricing, power, rent, free riding. You can turn all these into generic, qualitative claims expressed as generics. Here we've got a ton of generics. This is a table of propositions to which most economists subscribe, according to this famous economist, based on various a ceiling on rents reduces the quantity and quality of housing. Tariffs and import quotas usually reduce general economic. You see the sense of them being expressed as generics with no quantifiers and no quantitative. There's a whole list of them. That's how it's going to snow with. The gap between social security funds and expenditures will become unsustainably large within the next 50 years if current policies remain unchanged. A large federal budget deficit has an adverse effect on the economy, etc., etc., etc. Here are some others. Those who pay for wood will value it more and use it more. This is the bed net example, for instance. Charging for bed nets reduces access. More. Policy may act as a barrier to ownership, some cost effect, or individuals are more likely to use goods they pay for. Okay, so I think you've got the idea. So now we want to go from economics into other domains. So the use of economic concepts without presumption of quantification or an optimality benchmark is widespread in political science and sociology. So we're already doing this in some other fields, that is taking economics qualitative lessons expressed as generics into other domains and uniting them with the knowledge there. It's used throughout the comparative capitalisms field, for instance, in this book, and in economic sociology, as we can see in the socioeconomic review. So, economics can export hard-won lessons as qualitative tendency principles. Is that damning with faint praise? No. It's often as good as you can get. Well, it's almost always as good as you can get. And it's very useful for prediction. As Mill said, when you find that something has a tendency, you're going to be moved more in that direction than you would otherwise be, despite all the other polls doing whatever they're doing. And then secondly, the rigorous derivation in economics can be a guide to where you might expect it to apply outside, but you have to be a bit imaginative about this. And there are guides that are sometimes otherwise unavailable. So guides to the range of application. It's not just me that says so. Models contain information about the circumstances in which they are relevant and applicable. They tell us when we can use them and when we might not. They come with explicit user's guides, teaching notes on how to apply them. That's because they are transparent about their critical assumptions and behavioral mechanisms. I mean, of course, they're idealized, and we have to figure out exactly what that would amount to in the real world, but still it gives you some constraints on ideas about applicability. Let's look at this famous Robert Lucas's 1976 model of Phillips curve. The Phillips curve tendency principle: rising inflation tends to drive unemployment down, if only in the short term. Now, Lucas derives this principle from a set of assumptions. And the central lessons Lucas draws are about the range of application of the Phillips curve. The inflation-unemployment trade-off occurs only where agents mistake inflation for price rises in their sector. So his argument was that this is a general tendency of rising inflation to drive unemployment down, but that tendency only operates when people mistake inflation for price rises in their sector. And so whether this is true or not, I don't want to endorse that. What I want to do is show the logic of it. And what Lucas argued was, well, the government tries to use inflation to affect unemployment, but that's not going to work, because when the government does it, we know what's going on, and nobody makes this mistake, and you don't get a Phillips curve. So what he's drawing from, what you actually see from the model, according to Lucas, is what the range of application would be. So his theoretical assumptions, there's only one type of shock, monetary, information is imperfect, agents are price takers, agents' decisions are driven by relative market-specific prices, ideal competition, markets clear, agents maximize and expected utilities on constraints using all the information available. Now here's more on the range of application now. There's a so what he does is there's a derivation from a set of explicit assumptions so that the Phillips curve tendency must obtain where those assumptions are satisfied. Any place those assumptions are satisfied, small world where those assumptions are satisfied, the Phillips curve will hold, but only as a tendency, of course. Now there's, so that's the point. Some of those assumptions are highly idealized, but you can guesstimate whether your situation is enough like them that they're not playing, some of the idealizing assumptions aren't playing an essential role. And the essential feature, according to Lucas, is this business of people being deceived about what's going on. So there is a whole lot more that other social sciences can offer. As I say, that's supposing idealizations like representative agents, some of those ones I went through don't make a difference. So my overall lesson then is, Wilhelm Lexus criticized Maynard's program for only being able to offer general tendencies, not accurately usable for precise prediction. Lexus was wrong. Tendencies really matter to understanding the large, messy world where economics can help. But precise prediction is not possible. So my overall advice is, don't be afraid of exporting the qualitative and inexact, so as long as it is well-grounded in economics itself. So loose knowledge that John believed in, loose knowledge is a good thing. Conclusion, is economics queen of the social sciences? No. Moreover, she gets a lot more not sitting on her throne.